The courtroom fell into a silence so thick, it felt cursed. Rasheeda stood still, her eyes locked on the glowing scroll in the judge's hand, a scroll etched not in ink, but in threads of light, pulsing with the binding magic of the Old South Court. The moment the final rune turned red, the gavel slammed down like thunder. "Judgment rendered," the judge declared, voice echoing with unnatural force. "The child is his, the frost line is broken." Kirk's breath hitched. His hands trembled as he reached for the table to steady himself, but it was too late. The moment Rasheeda turned toward him, victorious but hollow-eyed, the glass behind her shattered. Not from impact, but from rage. Kirk's aura flared with unspoken grief, betrayal, and a guilt that was older than this case. A ghostly voice whispered from the mirror shards at his feet. "The debt is blood, and you owe more than gold." Then he collapsed. Eyes wide, lips whispering a name no one in the room recognized but Rasheeda. The judge blinked. Did he just say, "Jasmine"? And just like that, the case was over. But something much darker had just begun. Long before the courtroom chants of justice echoed and scrolls of binding magic were cast in crimson fire, there was just a girl from Atlanta, and a boy who thought he could run from destiny. Rasheeda wasn't born with power, not the kind that glowed in her palms or echoed in spells, but she had fire in her spirit, the kind that made kingdoms tremble without ever needing a wand. Kirk Frost was born under a different sky, quite literally. Village whispers still tell of the night he was born, a storm with no clouds, lightning that struck upward, and a midwife who fled in tears. His grandmother, Aura May, once told Rasheeda in confidence that Kirk had an unfinished soul, half claimed by something ancient. But Rasheeda didn't care. Not back then. She loved him blindly, fiercely. Their marriage was forged not just in love but in rebellion. Against Kirk's family. Against the whispered curses. Against the scroll found in his father's coffin that warned, "The frost blood will betray the warmest heart." But the betrayal came anyway. The affair with Jasmine wasn't just physical. That's what shattered Rasheeda most. Jasmine was marked with an emblem Rasheeda recognized from her grandmother's forbidden lore. The mark of echoed wombs. A symbol worn only by women cursed to birth children tied to multiple timelines, children that echoed lives never lived. It wasn't an affair. It was a binding. A magical one. Rasheeda had tried to forgive him. She burned the scrolls. She poured honey over his pillow every night to sweeten his dreams. An old love magic from her mother's recipe book. But love spells can't heal broken prophecies. Then came the child support claim, not from Jasmine but from the kingdom's magical judiciary, acting on a ripple in the astral paternity registry. Apparently, Kirk's soul had bound itself to 2 children across 2 timelines, and the second child, an echo of Jasmine's son, had emerged in another village, crying Rasheeda's name at birth. She didn't understand. Not fully. But she knew magic had lied to her. Or Kirk had. Maybe both. Kirk, on the other hand, was unraveling. He hadn't meant to cheat, not in the way mortals do. But something pulled him toward Jasmine. A dream. A scent. A melody in her voice that matched the lullaby his mother used to hum during his fevers. Jasmine didn't seduce him, she remembered him. From somewhere else. Somewhere they'd never been. He tried to tell Rasheeda. "I feel cursed," he whispered once, in the middle of the night. "Like my choices were made long before I was born." Rasheeda had flinched. "Then unmake them," she said. "But some choices can't be unmade. Especially not when your blood sign scrolls older than the court itself." The judge, a sorcerer known only as Vellum, summoned both of them 2 months ago. Rasheeda had worn a cloak made from her mother's veil. Kirk wore his grandfather's ring iron to repel enchantments. The courtroom wasn't made of stone. It was carved from obsidian grief, pulsing with memory. Everything they had ever done played in flickers across the walls as they spoke. The judge asked Kirk one question. "Did you consent to the binding?" Kirk had looked up, tears glossing his eyes. "In this life, no." The judge nodded. "But in another?" Kirk said nothing. That silence was a confession. Rasheeda's heart cracked right then, not just because he hadn't fought harder, but because she knew what that meant. Jasmine wasn't just his mistake, she was his fate. In another version of reality, the court recognized the binding. The child was his. And the price of broken timelines? Blood debt, emotional reparation, and eternal tethering of magical finance. In short, child support. But not just gold. Soul dues. Now Rasheeda had custody not just of her dignity, but of the truth. And Kirk? He couldn't bear it. Every time he looked at the child, he saw two. One he might have loved in another life. One he abandoned in this one. The guilt wasn't logical. It haunted his breath, made his reflection flicker when he passed glass. The ancestors had begun whispering again, especially Aura May, whose portrait wept ash every midnight. And Rasheeda? She'd won. But she didn't feel victorious, she just felt empty. Because sometimes, justice doesn't heal, it just confirms that the damage was real. The day after the verdict, the city didn't sleep. The magical community buzzed like a hive poked with betrayal. Rasheeda's name was being sung in secret circles not just as a woman who conquered injustice, but as one who bent fate itself to her will. But behind every chant of praise, there was a ripple of fear. Because no one beats a prophecy without consequence. At the center of it all sat Kirk Frost, now confined within his estate, a mansion wrapped in charms to protect him from psychic backlash. But they couldn't protect him from himself. He hadn't spoken in hours. Not since the courtroom collapse. His reflection had disappeared from every mirror. Even the family portrait in the hall blurred where his face used to be. Doctors came. Witches came. Even Bambi tried to talk to him. But all he whispered was, "I didn't choose this timeline." The magical judiciary had ruled. Not only was the child his, but his very aura was out of alignment, unstable, fractured, and echoing with overlapping memories. That meant one thing. Kirk had somehow crossed timelines, either willingly or under enchantment. And now the consequences were bleeding into his body, his sanity, and his legacy. Rasheeda had taken temporary custody of the Frost estate's financial sigils. It wasn't about gold, it was about soul balance. The child support order had activated a writ of ancestral debt, pulling energy from Kirk's ancestral vault magic passed down through generations. Rasheeda didn't want it, but she had no choice. The magic demanded repayment. She tried to visit him. Once, she wore gloves to avoid setting off the blood wards. He looked at her like a stranger. "You don't remember, do you?" Kirk said, voice hollow. "The river. The fireflies. The vow we made with the red ribbon." She froze. That memory wasn't from this life. That's when she knew he wasn't all here anymore. Pieces of Kirk were scattered across timelines, like shards of broken glass. Flashback. The forbidden romance. Years ago, long before Rasheeda, before Jasmine, there was another name. Amaraya. No one remembered her. Not even Rasheeda. But in a dream that clung to Kirk like incense smoke, he saw her clearly. A witch cloaked in indigo flame, her touch able to bend rivers, her kiss strong enough to freeze time. She had loved Kirk, but not this Kirk. A version of him born in a realm where Rasheeda never existed. And Jasmine was the village oracle, not the betrayer. In that world, Kirk made a promise. And in this one, that promise came due. The investigation begins. After Rasheeda's court win, an elder named Marlowe, head of the Magical Paternity Guild, approached her. He carried a scroll sealed in wax and thornvine, an illegal document, buried for decades. Inside were the true bloodline records of Jasmine's child. Not only was Kirk the father, but so was another version of him. The child carried twin aura strands, something that hadn't been seen since the Blood Era, a time when mages split their souls across dimensions to cheat death and fate. The child wasn't just magical, he was dangerous. A potential anchor, capable of collapsing timelines if too many versions of reality bled together. Marlowe warned Rasheeda, "You've won this battle, but you may have awakened a war older than any of us." Rasheeda felt her knees buckle. She had only wanted the truth, justice. closure. But now it felt like she had stepped into a battlefield far larger than divorce court. The first shocking twist. 3 days after the verdict, Rasheeda received an unmarked package delivered by Raven. Inside was a mirror shard, humming with Kirk's aura, and wrapped in a blood-stained ribbon. Beneath it, a single line was written in Old Frost family script. "This isn't the child you think it is." She dropped it. Her hands trembled, not from fear, from recognition. The ribbon, the red one, was the same one they had tied around each other's wrists during their secret midnight ritual 20 years ago. A vow of eternal love. That memory had faded over time, until now. But how did Kirk know she would remember? Unless he wasn't the only one slipping between timelines. Suddenly, every fight, every kiss, every betrayal felt layered. As if some were hers, and some belonged to a version of herself she had never met. She raced to the archives, breaking into Aura May's forbidden chest. Inside, wrapped in raven feathers and salt, was her old diary. She hadn't seen it in 20 years. Page 42 had been torn out. But the remaining entry read, "If this child is born in the wrong timeline, it will unravel us all. The price will be blood, or love, but never both." Rasheeda collapsed. The case wasn't just about support. It was about survival. And Kirk wasn't just paying for his mistakes. He was paying for a future he tried to outrun. A trusted ally is hiding something. The child might be a walking tear in the fabric of magic itself. And Rasheeda isn't just a mother now, she may be a guardian of the balance between realms. But what if the only way to fix the damage is to give the child back? The ink on the verdict had barely dried when the whispers began. Not in court, not in media, but in villages, hidden magical taverns, underground circles that Rasheeda once thought were just fantasy. The scrolls had done more than bind Kirk to child support, they had activated a magical ripple. Every realm, every variant timeline, felt it. In the hidden village of Ebonrest, a blind scribe named Lysel awoke screaming, her fingers scorched with unseen fire, and her mouth uttered a name she hadn't spoken in 30 years. Kirk Frost has been breached. The scrolls had lied. The first false message. A courier bird slammed into Rasheeda's window the next night, its feathers drenched in saltwater and omen. Attached to its leg was a wax-sealed letter, written in familiar handwriting, Kirk's. But Rasheeda knew the truth immediately. Kirk couldn't write anymore. His magical connection to ink had been severed by the judiciary's punishment. She opened it anyway, trembling. The message read, "The child is a decoy. You were never meant to win this. They are watching you. Return the soul scroll or he dies." No signature. No proof. Only a strange black feather folded inside obsidian black with a single red vein pulsing faintly. It wasn't from this realm. And Rasheeda's stomach turned. If the scroll was fake, who had written it? And more terrifyingly, what scroll were they even talking about? She had nothing except the judiciary's official verdict. Unless... She sprinted to her warded safe and tore it open. Beneath layers of enchanted cloth and protective runes was the only thing she hadn't touched since the case ended, Kirk's soul fragment. All accused in cases of astral binding were required to surrender a piece of their soul to seal judgment. But now, it was pulsing. Not gently, but violently. Erratically. Someone or something was trying to reclaim it. Enter the rival lover. Jasmine returns. At that exact hour, on the southern coast of the kingdom, Jasmine reappeared. Not the scandalized woman Rasheeda remembered. No. This Jasmine wore a cloak of shadow glass, her eyes silvered over, her voice speaking in riddles. She walked into the village square and announced, "I come to collect what was always mine. The boy, the prophecy, the Frost legacy." Everyone stared in silence. Children cried. Dogs ran. Magic stirred. Marlowe, the paternity guildmaster, heard about her sudden reappearance and immediately contacted Rasheeda. "This isn't the same Jasmine," he whispered. "Something's riding her spirit. I believe she was taken." "Taken by what?" "An echo soul," he said grimly. "The same force that tried to claim Kirk, This isn't about child support anymore, Rasheeda. This is timeline warfare. And Jasmine was its first foot soldier. Gossip in the taverns. Secrets spill. Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, the taverns of the magical underground buzzed. Everyone talked. She cursed him, you know. Rasheeda's the one who summoned the judiciary. She wanted blood. No, Jasmine used a love trap spell, tied to his dreamwalk state. I heard the child isn't even his, he's a vessel. For the soul of Frost the First. Y'all don't get it. This is why they banned multi-timeline romances. Too unstable. Amidst it all, one voice rang clearer than the rest. A cloaked woman with a golden braid whispered, "The child is not a child, he's a trigger, and when he turns 13, the veil will rip." That night, every mirror in the city shattered at once. Even the ones no longer reflecting Kirk's face. Chilling prophecy. The Echo Trial. Desperate for answers, Rasheeda returned to the Oracle's temple, a place she had sworn never to revisit after her mother's death. Inside, she placed the soul fragment on the obsidian altar. The walls trembled, fire rose from the floor, and a whisper filled the room. "You think you've won, but you've only passed the first trial." The Echo Trial begins at Blood Moon. And then, a memory surfaced that Rasheeda never lived. In it, she was married to Kirk, but he wasn't the man she knew. He wore robes, held a sword of frost, and stood over Jasmine's broken body. In his arms, he held a child with Rasheeda's eyes, but with dark, burning runes carved into his skin. The child opened his mouth and spoke with Kirk's voice. "They made me choose. I chose wrong." Then the memory faded. She gasped, drenched in sweat. The Oracle's voice boomed one last time. "The final father of this child has not yet been revealed." The second major twist, the real father, might not be Kirk. Everything unraveled. Marlowe sent Rasheeda a hidden file from the guild's deepest records. The scroll had been tampered with. A magical imprint, almost undetectable, had been embedded in the paternity rune disguising lineage. According to the forbidden reading, Kirk's aura was only present as a secondary contributor. The child's true first magical parent was never revealed in court. It had been magically suppressed. And now, the scroll began rewriting itself. The ink bled. The name forming beneath the line read, Mendices. Rasheeda dropped the scroll. Her heart stopped. Her breath caught fire in her throat. Mendices? No, that couldn't be. That was Yandy's husband. A family friend. A guest at their wedding. A confidant. But magic didn't lie. Or if it did, it only did so with purpose. Recap of the twist. Rasheeda receives a fake magical threat tied to Kirk's soul fragment. Jasmine reappears, possessed by a timeline entity. The magical underground spills rumors, revealing bigger forces at play. Rasheeda receives a prophecy and a timeline memory she never lived. A rewritten scroll reveals Kirk may not be the primary father. Mendice's name is revealed as the child's original bloodline source. Now loyalties are in question. The war for timeline control has begun, and Rasheeda stands at the center of a magical unraveling that could tear everything apart. The city was no longer whispering, it was screaming. The moment Mendice's name surfaced on the rewritten soul scroll, magical papers across the realms began folding themselves shut. Ink vanished from court records, scrolls blackened, and in a hidden pocket of the kingdom known as Whisperhold, the arcane tribunal convened for an emergency midnight meeting. Their topic: soul fraud and forbidden lineage. Rasheeda tried to keep the news quiet, but in the era of enchanted ravens, nothing stays buried. Gossip at the magical taverns. At the Velvet Cauldron, the most infamous magical tavern in Midtown, the gossip was hot as fire elixir. "She's gonna go after Mendices next," one barmaid hissed. "I heard Yandy's already filed a soul claim to block any magical paternity bond," a gnome bartender added. "No way," said a cloaked customer. "If the prophecy child is part Frost, part Mendices, then that child could control the veil itself." "You mean time, memory, legacy, even life?" There were bets made, spells cast. And somewhere, in a booth made invisible by glamour, someone watched the chatter with glowing red eyes and scribbled a new name in a cursed ledger. Rasheeda. Scrolls sent in secret. In a candlelit chamber beneath her estate, Rasheeda read through the hidden scrolls passed to her by Marlowe and the Guild. Most were written in Veil script, an ancient language that shifted with the reader's emotions. One scroll trembled in her hand. It was short, brutal, final. The child's birth collapsed a timeline. He cannot be allowed to reach adulthood without choosing a side, yours or theirs. She didn't know who wrote it. It was unsigned, reeking of cinders and old iron. Another scroll came from someone she did recognize, Yandy. It read, "I don't know what you saw. I don't know what that scroll told you. But I swear on everything sacred I never let Mendices near her." Not like that. If they've rewritten time, we're both victims. Please. Let's not burn everything before we even understand what we're holding. Rasheeda stared at it. Her hands shook. But she said nothing. She didn't respond. Because her next move required silence. And strength. A confrontation in candlelight. The moon was low. The estate was still. And Kirk was finally speaking again. She found him sitting by the broken mirror that no longer showed either of their reflections. Just flickers of a child's face, over and over, crying out names that shifted with the wind. "Do you believe me now?" Kirk asked, his voice tired, broken. Rasheeda crossed her arms. "Believe what? That you were manipulated? That you never meant to bind your soul to a cursed prophecy? Or that you were just a victim like the rest of us?" He didn't answer. She stepped closer. "You told me Jasmine haunted your dreams. But what you didn't say is that you were haunting hers too. You weren't pulled into this. You jumped." Kirk looked up. "And yet, I always came back to you." Rasheeda's eyes flared. "Then why does our child have half a soul while another child walks around with your full name carved into his fate?" He opened his mouth, then stopped. Because there was no answer. Only fire between them. She leaned closer. "They think I'll fold, that I'll collapse under the weight of this mess. But I've faced demons older than this bloodline. I carried a son through fire while you chased ghosts." Kirk blinked. "What are you going to do?" She held up a fresh scroll. "Finish what the court started," she said coldly. "And expose the one thing you're all too afraid to admit." The world around them was in chaos. But the storm inside was worse. The court's ruling was just the match. The firestorm had just begun. The night air pulsed like it had a heartbeat. Inside the Frost estate, every candle flickered unnaturally, as if reacting to the tension building between timelines. Rasheeda stood at the center of the spell-marked floor, scroll in hand, ready to finally unseal the last truth. But before she could speak the incantation, the room exploded in blinding blue light. Yandy appeared. She didn't knock. She didn't speak. She just held up a trembling hand and dropped a piece of parchment onto the floor. It was a veil scroll, the highest classification of magical document, known to rewrite truth when activated by dual bloodlines. Rasheeda's eyes narrowed. "Where did you get that?" Yandy's voice cracked. "From Jasmine." Behind her, footsteps echoed. And then, Jasmine emerged from the shadows. Not possessed. Not broken. Just tired. Human again. "I've been used," she said softly. "I thought the boy was the key, but he's not." Her eyes met Rasheeda's. "You are." The final revelation. The scroll unsealed itself mid-air. Golden runes pulsed along the edges. And then a voice, ancient and female, filled the room. "The child of echoes will be born not from betrayal, but from refusal. Not from passion, but from purpose. The father is not of the blood, but of the bond broken and unacknowledged." The candle flames turned black. The scroll flared once more, before revealing a final name beneath the word, Origin. Not Kirk. Not Mendices. But R. Smith. Rasheeda stumbled back. "No." Jasmine closed her eyes. "It's not about who fathered the child. It's about whose soul was bound to the child through intention. You invoked protection magic. You cast a barrier when the child was in danger. You linked yourself, unknowingly. Yandy's mouth fell open. Then that means, Rasheeda whispered, the child is mine. The soul fracture begins. At that moment, a high-pitched scream shattered the silence. The child who had been asleep, safe in a warded chamber, was now floating in the air, surrounded by glowing sigils that spun like blades. His skin flickered between timelines. One moment he looked like Kirk, then Mendices, then Rasheeda herself. Then, someone none of them recognized. Blood ran from his eyes. The walls began to pulse. Jasmine dropped to her knees. He's splitting. Yandy screamed, stop the spell! But it was too late. The prophecy hadn't been about paternity. It had been about identity. The final blow. The child's voice deepened, no longer a child's voice, but something older. I was never meant to be born whole. You made me fracture. And now, you will remember every timeline you chose to forget. He raised a hand and time folded. In a flash, Rasheeda saw every version of herself. A version where she married Mendices. A version where she never left Kirk. A version where she died in childbirth. A version where she raised the child alone, on a burning battlefield. And in each version the child always cried her name. Then he vanished. Just like that. The cliffhanger. Silence fell. The scroll crumbled to ash. The estate cracked. And a voice spoke from the mirror behind them, Kirk's reflection, now restored but twisted in rage. He's gone, but not for long. The echo will return at blood moon. And when he does, one of us will have to die. Rasheeda turned to Yandy, to Jasmine, to the ruined room. None of them knew what to say, because nothing had ended. In fact, it had just begun. Now you've seen it. What began as a simple child support case has cracked open a fracture in fate, revealing timelines tangled in betrayal, magic, and hidden bloodlines. Rasheeda thought she was fighting for truth, but she may have been protecting a child who could destroy the world, or save it. And Kirk? He's not just broken. He's splintered, haunted by promises made in lives he no longer remembers. But what about Mendices? Why did his name appear? And more importantly, if the child's soul fractured tonight, who picked up the missing piece? Now Jasmine's role has shifted. Yandy's trust is crumbling, and Rasheeda faces a horrifying truth. She might not just be the boy's guardian, she might be his creator. So we ask you, would you forgive a love that cursed your bloodline? What would you do if your child shattered reality just by speaking your name? And if your reflection ever spoke back, would you listen? Let us know in the comments. Drop your theories. Choose your side. Number Team Rasheeda, number Team Yandy, or number the child. Subscribe, share, and prepare your wards, because in part 2, the blood moon rises, and one of them won't survive what's coming.